Welcome to r/JustNoHOA, where people tell stories about their crazy homeowner associations. And without any further ado, let's dive right into the stories. HOA does not like my truck. The other post about the truck reminded me about this. My dad bought a new truck back in the 70s that 30 years later became my first car. It was ugly as crap and beat to hell, but ran okay, and because of its age, was exempt from emissions testing, so it was legally registered and everything. I almost always parked it in the garage when not driving it to school and back, but had to park in the street for a couple days while using the garage for other stuff. A week later, my parents got a letter from the HOA saying not to park outside because the truck was unsightly and brought down the neighborhood's value. We ignored it, of course, because they could not legally do anything about it. We saw the HOA president drive by our house multiple times, taking pictures in her fancy new Range Rover, and we would get letters anytime it sat outside for more than a day. I did what any other sane person in my situation would do and started parking in the street every day. Although most of our neighbors were rich snobs and looked down on my parents for not buying me a brand new car, they never complained about my parking because they all hated the HOA Nazi too and knew it pissed her off. She was recently voted out of the HOA and everybody is happier. I still have and love the truck and would never get rid of it. It has been a part of the family for longer than I have. I occasionally take it to my parents' house to visit just for old time's sake. Do you guys own any cars that pretty much only have sentimental value left? Like basically anything that is super old but is not worth any money anymore? Let us know in the comments. HOA sued to have us join and lost, now bills us for their legal fees. We bought a house in 2015 and we made damn sure that it's not part of an HOA. Soon after moving in, the HOA started sending us documents about joining, which we completely ignored. We were even visited once by the president of the HOA, and my husband made it clear to him that we have no intention of joining. In June 2016, we received a letter that said the HOA is considering legal action against us to have us join because by living here, we are benefiting from the HOA's work without paying for it, and it is a financial burden on everyone other member. The letter insisted that a legal action can be avoided if we agree to join. We ignored it. The president visited us again in July 2016 and said the same thing, when we pretty much told him, "See you in court." They indeed took legal action against us earlier this year and we hired a lawyer and went to the court. Their motion was dismissed immediately. We thought it is the end of it, but to make sure, we had our lawyer send them a cease and desist letter to stop this constant harassment. Now, we received a letter from them saying we need to reimburse their legal fees of about $3,700 according to the Article X Section Y of the HOA's CC&Rs with a copy of the CC&Rs. The referenced paragraph says something along the lines of, "The association is entitled to recovery of the fees incurred by bringing legal action against the homeowner, as deemed necessary by the board to enforce the CC&Rs and preserve the best interests of the community." Out of the $3.7K, $2,000 is related to their fees for suing us and the remaining $1,700 are for the demand letters that they have been sending us during all these times. We are so tired of fighting this horrible HOA and we are thinking whether we can be granted a restraining order against the HOA. What is the best way to fight this charge and make sure they will stop their harassment? To be honest, I did not even know that you can get a restraining order against pretty much a group of people. But honestly, what would you recommend the OP to do in this case against the homeowner association bullies? But of course, we don't count moving away in order to please the HOA an option. And by the way, if you have watched until here, please don't forget to post some star emojis in the comments and also like the video if you want to support me. Thank you so much. It is the Great Pumpkin Vindictive HOA President. I have told a shorter version of this story in the comments, but it is probably worth its own post so we can all hate on HOAs some more. I babysat and elder sat for the neighbors down the street who committed this malicious compliance, so I was there to hear the ranting as this whole mess went down. We will call my neighbors Liz and Dave. They were nice folks who ran afoul of the Homeowners Association, HOA, when the busybody president who lived next door to them, we will call her Joan, got it in her rotted turnip for a brain that Liz and Dave had taken in an illegal renter. Renting out rooms was strictly against HOA policy. They had not rented out a room. Liz's elderly mother had moved in with them after breaking her hip and being unable to live alone anymore. Joan sent them a very threatening letter about their unlawful renter and how fines would accrue if the unlawful renter did not vacate immediately. It was accompanied with a copy of that part of the bylaws and pictures of Liz's elderly mother taken through windows of their house. Creep alert. They wrote back there was no renter and explained the situation. Joan did not believe that story and had the HOA lawyer start sending them certified letters about their continued violations with ever increasing insane fines. This went over poorly. Liz and Dave got their own lawyer to fire back a cease and desist letter. After many increasingly aggressive back and forth, it all culminated in an association meeting where Liz, Dave and Liz's mother came in with ID and birth certificates and basically made Joan look like the pimple on the backside of humanity that she was. They won, but Joan was furious and swore she would get them for something. Joan maintained until the day I left for college, last I knew of her, that Liz and Dave had forged those driver's licenses and birth certificates to keep their unlawful renter. Cut to the following fall. Liz and Dave needed to repaint the house after making some siding repairs post-hurricane. They carefully checked the bylaws for approved paint colors and picked out a fairly bland shade of something between brown and tan. They gave the painters the color info listed in the bylaws to the painters and painting happened. Less than a week after their house was painted, they got another certified letter from the HOA lawyer stating their house was the wrong color. They fired back evidence they ordered exactly what was in the bylaws. Well, after many back and forth, it turned out the approved color and the swatches on file with the board no longer matched because the manufacturer had changed the colors in their line slightly due to some kind of formula change. Their house was a few shades darker than it should have been. See, the bylaws listed the manufacturer color info for convenience, but the shades actually had to match the official swatches you could have theoretically borrowed from the board and gotten color matched. Nobody ever did that, but Joan was out for blood after the unlawful renter and forced them to have to repaint. Liz and Dave were taking no chances on the second try. They got the swatch set from the HOA. For some reason, it made no distinction between approved accent colors, most houses in the neighborhood had brightly colored doors, or house colors. They decided that if they had to paint their house a second time, Joan, the dog that caught the car, could live next to the most garish option they had. It was pumpkin orange. The painters asked multiple times if they were sure. They were very sure. You could not see the orange from inside, but you sure could from next door. Joan made many attempts to object to this, but it was within the letter of the HOA rules and the house stayed orange until long after I moved away. Honestly, at this point I'm kind of curious what other crazy stuff the HOA tries to control in your everyday life. I assume they would also like to know/control my bathroom schedule, as well as maybe the TV program that I watch or something. Kind of reminds me of East Germany after the Second World War. But anyway, let's continue. Caught HOA trying to break into my house, now they have issued me a $1,000 fine. I bought a house 18 months ago, which was a member of the HOA. I did change the front door of the house to something a lot more secure. About a month ago, in the middle of a weekday, I noticed two people trying to open the door with keys which were not working. I confronted them while my wife called the police, and it became apparent that they were officers of the HOA trying to look for an infringement. There is a section in the CC&Rs that says, "The association is entitled to access the homeowner's property with reasonable notice." And also a section that says, "The homeowner may voluntarily submit the property keys to the association. However, once submitted, the association is not required to return the keys. Submission of a key which does not work may incur a fine determined by the board." Which according to them, the keys to my property has been submitted. I am assuming the previous owner have done so. I have spoken with 2 board members who said they suspected that the keys that they hold for my property may have been fake, and they have authorized their officers to check this out. They say, according to them, in this case, as they were searching for an infringement, reasonable notice means no notice to ensure that I won't have enough time to replace the locks. And now I have received a $1,000 fine because the keys submitted for my property to the HOA are fake. I have talked to a board member who tells me that their interpretation of the contract is that once a real key is submitted, the key must be kept up to date at all times or a fine is warranted. They also told me to not fight this, as according to the bylaws, the HOA is entitled to recover their legal fees from me in case I bring them to court or they bring me to court. So I will lose either way, because legal fees will end up costing me more than the fine itself. Not sure if it is relevant, but the office of the HOA looks a lot like a leisure room. They have a pool table, a bar with a fancy fringe, and a ton 1 drinks, a large TV and couches and stuff like that. And this is not an amenity that is available for the people in the neighborhood. This is the relaxation room for the HOA officers and board members, who are all old retired people. I definitely felt like this fine is for me to fund whatever they have going on there. Help? I also want to add that this is a house, not a condo or apartment. Wait, so just in case I got that right, so if you signed up for that HOA and then you fight them in court because they did something bad to you, then I even have to pay their legal fees. Honestly, to me it sounds like the founders of this HOA just try to cover their asses as much as possible in case things go south. I have to admit, in the so-called land of the free, this whole HOA concept seems a bit out of place, if you ask me. What would you advise OP to do? Let us know in the comments. The next story is gonna be a little bit different, as it is more of an article, but I found it extremely interesting. The title is "Soldier in Iraq Loses Home Over $800 Debt." Michael Clawer is a captain in the Army Reserve who commanded over 100 soldiers in Iraq. But while he was fighting for his country, a different kind of battle was brewing on the home front. Last September, Michael returned to Frisco, Texas to find that his homeowners association had foreclosed on his $300,000 house and sold it for $3,500. This story illustrates the type of legal quagmire that can get out of hand while soldiers are serving abroad and their families are dealing with the stress of their deployment. And fixing the mess is not easy. Michael went on active duty in February of 2008 and was sent to Iraq. After he shipped out, his wife May slipped into a deep depression, according to court documents. A lot of people say that the deployment is more stressful on the spouse than the actual person who's being deployed. Michael, 37, says in an interview. May Clawer had 2 kids to take care of, a 10-year-old and a 1-year-old with a serious seizure-related disorder. In addition, she was worried sick about her husband. Michael's company was doing convoy security in Iraq, an extremely dangerous job. It was a pretty tough year for the whole company, he says. We had IEDs, rocket attacks and mortar attacks, and a few soldiers that were hurt pretty bad and had to be airlifted back to the States. Seeking to avoid hearing about the situation in Iraq, May stopped watching the news. She rarely answered the door, and Michael says he could not tell her when he went outside the wire off base. May also stopped opening the mail. I guess she was scared that she would hear bad news, says Michael. That was why she missed multiple notices from the Heritage Lakes Homeowners Association informing her that the family owed $800 in dues, and then subsequent notices stating that the HOA was preparing to foreclose on the debt and seize the home. In Texas, homeowners associations can foreclose on homes without a court order, no matter the size of the debt. In May 2008, the HOA sold the Clawer's home for a pittance $3,500, although its appraisal value was $300,000 according to court documents. The buyer then resold the house to a third person. Select Management CO, the company that manages Heritage Lakes, declined to comment for this story. And unfortunately, guys, the only update in regards to this story I found is that the family set up a legal defense fund to help pay for their court battle. But then again, honestly, that is one of the most infuriating HOA stories I have heard so far. Also, as far as I know, there is certainly a set of laws that is supposed to protect service members from losing their homes or jobs while they are on active duty. At least the one that I found was the Service Member Civil Relief Act, SCRA. However, apparently the Homeowners Association's lawyer seemed to have found a loophole or something. Anyway, feel free to tell me your thoughts about this story in the comments, and now let's continue. Am I the a-hole for ignoring the HOA in the house my friends and I rent? My friends Jess, Megan and I rent a house. We are all recent college graduates, young professionals, and we are decent roommates to each other and decent neighbors as far as I can tell. The house we rent is part of a homeowners association, and the way the laws work is that the HOA has a legal contract with the homeowner. And the homeowner who is leasing out the property has a legal contract with his tenants. But the HOA has no authority over the tenants legally. It is on the landlord to include the HOA rules in his lease with the tenants. Anyway, some of the HOA rules were in the lease, like only having cars parked in the garage and driveway, none on the street. And like no political signage in the front yard. But there were relatively few. The lease was pretty much your standard lease. Anyway, neighbors have come over several times to tell us about HOA laws we are breaking. Not just the same few neighbors, there have been like 8. For example, they said we could not have junker cars in the driveway, and I was like, it's not a junker, it runs and I drive it every day. Plus, you should be taking this stuff to landlord. He's the homeowner in your association. The guy went off on me about how having cars like mine around lowers the property values, and I was like, my agreement was with landlord. My lease says nothing about what cars I can have. They don't like how my roommate has astrology wall tapestries over the windows instead of curtains. Or how we have a fire pit outside. Or how many friends we have over even though we never break the rules about cars. Few of our friends drive. They told my roommate it is not allowed to do do-it-yourself projects like woodworking or car maintenance in the driveway. And told me about noise rules that do not line up with the city noise ordinance. They told my roommate her friends cannot lock their bicycles up to the deck railing. Anyway, every time we tell these people that their contract is with the homeowner and our contract is with our landlord, we are following our contract, their contract is between them and landlord. And they have complained that the landlord is hard to get a reach of, he travels a lot, he's not communicative, and we are the ones living in the community. We need to follow its rules. Am I the a-hole for blowing all them off? So guys, what is your opinion? Is OP the a-hole in this story, or is he, as I would assume, rightfully standing up against the HOA bullies? Let us know in the comments. And the last story is gonna be from r/Ripe Stories and was posted by user Ravens Arts. It is titled, Had to pull a knife on my crazy mooching entitled X, and it fits the choosing beggars category. The main part of this happened from about mid-1989 to mid-1990 and went on sporadically for several years after. This is the story of one of the worst guys I have ever dated. In 1989, I began dating a guy named Tim for a little over 3 months. It was good for the first 2 months, but soon red flags began to pop up. Tim was always broke. He would always complain about having no money, yet would order pizza to my house when he was visiting and without telling me, then expect me to pay for it when it arrived. He also expected me to foot the bill every time we went out, I stopped going out with him, buy him beer, I'm underage, and cook for him. Tim also expected me to pick him up and drive him places, he had a motorcycle at the time, and never once gave or offered me gas money. Tim always wanted to borrow money and stuff from me when I said I couldn't. I was 19 and not rich. He would get mad and pout like a petulant child for an hour. Soon I noticed some of my things, jewelry mostly, and a couple of knives from my collection had gone missing. It was not long after that I found out that Tim had not only been stealing from me, but also lying about being broke and had been cheating on me with multiple girls. Naturally, I dumped his ass, and naturally, he could not let go. Tim would continuously blow up my phone, house phone, no cell phones back then, leaving multiple messages a day on my answering machine. Alternately telling me how much of a selfish, heartless bitch I was, how I did not deserve a guy like him, obviously, how bad his life was without me, and how much he missed and loved me. He He would do the last in his simpering voice as if I were some kind of an idiot. Or a dog he was trying to coax back into the house. He would even imply suicide a few times if I did not get back with him. The few times I did answer, I told him to F off. One day, Tim tried a different tactic. He called my house and decided to start talking dirty. He did this for about a minute before realizing he was actually talking to my mom, who thought it was hilarious and had started laughing and immediately hung up. The calls stopped for a couple of days after that, but alas, Tim was too stupid to leave well enough alone. The last time I saw him face to face was when he had called and asked if he could drop off some of my stuff back. My parents were not home, but stupid me foolishly agreed. What can I say? I was young and dumb, plus I wanted my stuff back. Tim came into my house under the pretense of bringing said stuff back, which of course he had not brought, and immediately tried sweet-talking his way back into my life. Found out later he had sold my stuff and or traded it for drugs, and I was having none of his BS and flat out said no. At my rejection, Tim got furious. He spat in my face, shook me hard and shoved me onto my bed. We were in my room, which was by the front door, and tried to hit me. At that time, Tim was over 6 foot, 7 inches taller than me and twice my weight. Too bad for Tim that I had gotten a phone call earlier from a former roommate of his, warning me of his intentions to get me back. So I had anticipated any possible violence, Dad had taught me well, and prepared accordingly. So when he pushed me onto my bed, I pulled a buck knife from under my pillow and put it to his groin, telling him, "If you don't get the F out of my house, I will cut off what little manhood you have left." I was scared, I'm not afraid to admit it. Also, I actually had my knife point on his femoral, not his junk, but it was close enough to his junk to get my point across. Tim immediately backed off and left, but not before calling me an effing cunt and trying to kick around some of my solid wood furniture and severely hurting the toes on his right foot. I was delighted to hear later. You would think that that would be the end of it, right? Of course not. Apparently, being threatened with a spontaneous sex change did not stop Tim from continuing his stupid calls. However, they did stop for a week due to him getting his butt kicked by some of my male friends when they found out what he did and tried to do to me at my house. But soon enough, Tim started calling again. One Friday night, late, my phone rang. Thinking it might be an emergency, Great Granny was in hospital, I answered. It was Tim, and he was blubbering, telling how he had wrecked his car that night, driving drunk, no license, no insurance, and had also totaled a mint condition 1968 Mustang by driving his car through some poor guy's garage, the horror, and had been arrested. And could I please come and bail him out? I could not believe it. This douche nozzle who had cheated on me, lied to me, spit in my face and tried to hit me, wanted me to drive an hour away to bail him out of jail. What the F? I laughed, could not help it, told him good luck with that and hung up on his loser ass. He did not call back that night, but like a case of herpes, he came back. After that night, he progressed to some light stalking, which stopped after my dad threatened to shoot his ass and more phone calls for another 6 months. By this point, I had met my future husband, who Tim knew and hated, got married and moved. When my mom told Tim I had gotten married and to who, he laughed and called my mom a liar and hung up. Tim continued to call occasionally until that house was sold. Last I heard, he's on the meth, has no job, lives in a nasty trailer, in a dump of a trailer park, and his life is a total crap show. I could say I felt sorry for him, but honestly, I would be lying. And honestly, in my opinion, if you felt sorry for that douchebag, then something would be wrong with you. But honestly, kudos to you for handling that situation so well. That guy sounds like an absolute freak. Either way, thank you for posting the story, but unfortunately this has to be the last story for today. I hope you enjoyed the content today, guys. And if you did, in case you're not subscribed yet, please feel free to subscribe to my channel so we can reach 12,000 subscribers before the end of the year. I hope you have a fantastic day and I see you again tomorrow.